Right.
But then we'll have a discussion.
Well, good afternoon. We will begin, open the finance meeting of the Juvenile Welfare Board with the statement that we do not have a quorum present, and the good news is we do not have action items on the agenda, and so we will go through the agenda, take minutes, but state publicly that we do not have a quorum today with no business to vote on, so we're in a good place. And so with that, we obviously call this meeting to order, and we'll begin. We have two discussion items, both of them Laura, so this is the Laura show today, Laura Kruger-Brock, and also would like to go on record once again, as we did at the board meeting, to recognize finalist of CFO of the year. And just a congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a high honor, in my
Yes.
opinion, and I want to recognize that.
Thank you. We'll find the results of that at the end of May.
Right.
Very
right.
good.
And so, and as soon as, I think we spoke, when the decision is made about the attendance for the event, just let us board members know and see what the opportunity is that maybe we can join you, or at least a few
Right.
of us to have board representation. Okay?
We're looking at whether to get a table or not. I don't know how many sit at that table. We certainly would extend an invitation for you all to attend.
Right,
Sure.
that would be good. So discussion item 2A would be the monthly financial and investment reports.
Yes.
Just reports, actually, for February and March. So go for it.
So the February report was provided at the board meeting, so I will kind of skip over that, but I bring it before the Finance Committee just in case there is any specific, questions or items that may want to be discussed. So I will move on to the March financial statements, and you've read through the highlights and so forth. I just wanted to point out a few things on the statement of revenue and expenditures, which would be the income statement per se. I wanted to point out that we've done extremely well on our investments, and we have exceeded our budget relative to earnings year-to-date. So our year-to-date earnings on our investment pools is $1.8 million. We're currently earning around 4.8% in our different pools that we have our funds invested in, and I'm happy that we've expanded that pool to 3, which we did a year ago, to allow not all of our eggs to be in any one basket. So we will continue to monitor the earnings when we move forward with projections into the subsequent year. The other item to point out on the financial statements would be the program expenditures. So currently year-to-date, so this is a 6-month financials through March. However, to remind you, we're on a cost reimbursement basis, so these expenses would actually represent 5/12 of the year as opposed to 6/12, so about 42% into the given budget year. Year-to-date, we've spent $27.8 million on our reimbursements compared to a year ago, $23.5 million. So we're up for just over $4 million in reimbursements to our different agencies. We continue to monitor that to make sure that they're submitting those on a regular basis. And overall, total expenditures year-to-date are 30.8%, which I said earlier, 42 would be at the 5-month mark. You also have before you the investment report, which shows the breakdown of the different investments. And I'll ask for any questions for either the February or March financials.
Commissioner Keurig?
No questions.
No. The investments are doing really well.
Yes.
And so do you think because of having the third pool?
Well, I think that we have 3 entities that are investing. They're all pretty comparable relative to the rate of returns that we're getting. Of course, we don't know the crystal ball that's going to happen going down the road, but projecting what the earnings would be based on how we spend down the revenues, I think we're postured to probably make another $1 million or $2 million next year if it continues the way it is this year.
Just going to say, they're all short-term fixed, and interest rates are up, and that's really the fundamental reason for our investments having gone up. And then they 2 and 3 years ago, they were way down because interest rates were just almost nominal.
Right, everything in those pools are liquid, relative to, if we were to need those for any given reason. But we keep our cash flow accordingly, and we transfer as we need funds to move in. As you know, we get the big influx of cash at the beginning of the year. We put it aside in our investment pools, and then we, spend it down as we get during the year. So we'll monitor that, continue to monitor that.
All right. So,
Okay, moving on to the budget. So we came before the Finance Committee on February 23rd, 2023, and we highlighted a variety of these same key assumptions, and we're coming back to you to just provide an update on some of the information we didn't have at the time when we met with you. And so in our memo, we kind of outlined what those changes were and just reiterated what the assumptions are in the forecast that were put together for fiscal '24 and projected out to fiscal '28. The first item was the property value. So at the time, when we tried to guesstimate what the change in the property values were, we had used a percentage increase of 8%. Well, in March, we did get the numbers from the county, and they came in, and they're projecting 7% for fiscal '24. And so we've adjusted our projections accordingly for all the years going out, including '25 through '28. So that kind of adjusted our revenues slightly. And then on the millage rate, just to remind you that we had approved a year ago at the board level to reduce our millage rate to 0.8508. We will continue to forecast that we keep that reduced rate for another year, and then the anticipation will be that we would go back up to the millage rate that we've had for many, many years of 0.8981.
but just the anticipation not to be discussed at that time
Correct.
based on where we are. But
Yes.
to keep the current millage rate for a 2-year period is what the board endorsed.
Yes, that's what they had discussed, and they wanted us to at least keep it for 2 years and then
Right.
reevaluate and kind of
Correct.
see where we are, if we would not want to make another change.
So that action on their part didn't bind us, but that is what we're proposing, is a second year at 0.8508.
Right. Well, that's a good point. That is a really good point, that we're not bound to that decision, but on the other hand, it was a consensus decision to at least stick with the 2 years. Mr. McCurrick?
You also understanding that we're going into a new strategic planning process coming up. So that's, the 2 years gives us some opportunity to really take a good hard look at what we're working on and what new programs would potentially cost. We've got a number of other things that are going on as well, like process improvement and the like, that needs to be played out to see exactly where that lays, and staffing and others that would fit both the new strategic plan and the adjustments, if there are any, through the process. So the 2 years gives us a little bit of a breathing room to make sure that the staff has the opportunity to really evaluate everything that's out there.
Including property values and
Exactly.
our investments. And I just want us to continue in this vein to keep that rate for 2 years and then reevaluate without a predetermined sort of, I know you used the word assumption, so that rang in my, I just want to make sure that we keep all options open. That would be my expectation as a single board member.
Absolutely, and I think it's important that we don't flip-flop from year to year. So I think it was a good decision to let's stick for 2 years, kind of see how it plays out, just as Mr. McCurrick indicated, with all the new programs, the process improvement, and these other things, and then reevaluate to say, oh, can we stay another year at this reduced rate? Do we want to go back to the old rate that we had? But based on the numbers that we're projecting, those are going to change at any given time.
The projection, I know when we get to the projections are when we get to the projection form, the projections are based on the increase
Correct.
after the 2 years. Thank you.
Correct. And I did have a large version of the forecast printed and at your table so that you don't have to squint and look at the little numbers. But yes, on the bottom there where it says millage rate, which is the yellow line on the bottom, we've got the 2 years that we're seeing the reduced rate, and then it goes back up to the other rate.
So one of the things I might suggest, because the next time we'll be presenting this would be at the upcoming board meeting, am I correct?
Yes.
At the upcoming board meeting in May, you'll be presenting this.
I don't think so.
Not
No,
in May, it would
it goes
be
in
June.
June, I believe.
Not May, June. And so I know it might cause discussion. I'm looking at staff particularly, but one of the things you might consider doing, I know my role as board member is to run a second sheet to accompany this with no increase.
And I did do that in anticipation maybe of that question. And if I did it for one more year at the reduced rate and then shifted, it would bring our reserve in fiscal '28 to 5.26%, which is well below our target of 8.3.
Got
We
it.
would have to juggle several other things around, but
Right.
I can certainly,
It would mean juggling, there's no
Oh,
doubt.
absolutely,
But I
right.
just, I want us to clearly spoken, leave our options open and do it with as much information as the board members can have.
Again, as a reminder, I think we really have to take a good hard look at the direction in which we're going and the strategic plan. So I agree with leaving everything wide open and in space to move in either direction for that matter. But let's put the emphasis on where do we go from here, using the thought of what tomorrow's luncheon is about, is imagine what will be next. We've got to really think about where are we headed to, and what has changed in this time frame that would make us either want to add or adjust programs, change providers, come up with new solutions to some problems that we still see existing. All of those are, kind of balls in the air when you're trying to think about the numbers and the cost. I want to be frugal about everything that we're doing and be very focused on the real impacts. At the same time, I want to make sure that we don't miss opportunities to better position our support for the children in this community.
And one benefit we have, of course, is that while on the one hand, we project out for this many years so that we have a sense of what our current actions and our projected actions would result in, we don't make those decisions until the year before. And so before we are making even preliminary decisions, much less final decisions, on next year meaning fiscal year 25's millage rate, we will have a year more information than we have right now. And all kinds of things could move. We've got a lot of assumptions in here that we're doing our best on, but that could ultimately be different than what we're projecting.
so moving on, the next item that we had brought before the Finance Committee in February, and again, no change in the administrative cost of living that we are projecting here. So our forecast is assuming a 6% staff COLA increase, which compared to the CPI-U, it's currently at 7.7%. We also got information from the state that they're considering an across-the-board increase at 5%, but they've included a caveat in there that they would also include a 10% increase for certain hard-to-hire positions. We're not really sure the definition of what that hard-to-hire might mean, but we think that the 6% that we have in our projections is reasonable. Moving on to administration, at this point, and again, when we were here in February, we were looking at the possibility of adding an additional 6 full-time equivalents to our staff. We had added a number of staff last year in anticipation of implementing all the new strategic programs. We are also in the process of undergoing the process improvement consultant, taking a look at some of our streamlining processes in the procurement arena and onboarding areas relative to our programs. We, at this time, have not specifically identified where this 6 staff may fall. We certainly will have to spend more time in determining where we think those needs are to be able to justify that we would need an additional 6. We would hope to kind of figure that out in the next couple of months. Certainly, we would have that buttoned down in September if in fact that's what we end up with. I know we're looking at not only on the program side, but administratively and with the building and all these things that we're doing. We did recently add a position for the turbo babies. We saw a need to add that, but right now, that's what we've factored into the forecast here. We do that also to kind of look at what this does to our admin rate if we were to implement that change. And for the fiscal year '24, that would still keep us under our 10%, which is at, this would come out at 7.97. And then projecting all the way out, it would still keep us under the 10% admin rate.
I would say while we project this at this point in time, none of that goes without saying that, oh, you know, we're going to do it. Though any position would need to be fully justified, and in fact, filling a vacancy needs to be fully justified. There are some positions that, because of the volume a given unit does, it's really clear that when we lose somebody, we're going to, you know, if the processes haven't changed, that we clearly need to replace that position. But across the organization, that's not necessarily true. The other thing I'd point out is the last 2 positions that Laura mentioned, and they were the last 2 that you were made aware of, really are both on the program side. And so one of them was Children's Mental Health Initiative, and another one was Turbo Babies. And so, you know, had we contracted that out, you wouldn't see that in FTEs at all. That doesn't show in this admin FTEs. It does show in programs. So you're able to tell. I mean, I'm not telling you need to take those out of that number. They're already taken out and put into program, as they should be.
I have, in our discussion yesterday with Laura Brock, Beth, you said exactly what my expectations would be, that there would be some justification, particularly as it relates to the future programming that's planned for this budget. We're dropping that number down to $750,000. So, you know, my thinking was, if we're really, you know, not necessarily going full bore, if you will, or full speed ahead the way we did last year with future programming, you know, I would like to hear that justification on these positions when the time comes. This is very preliminary to expect that, but I also, you know, want to, you know, the carryover of process improvement, I get all of that. The caseload, if you will, both fiscal and program caseload, I totally understand all of that. I've been at this table and in an agency, I get all of that. But we really encourage you all to move this year and spend the money and let's go and let's get that strategic plan going, and we did. And so it just, it glared at me in our conversation yesterday. It's like, let's, you know, let's look at future programming and say, well, really, we all want that as a board. And I speak for most of the board members because you've heard it. So I just want to make sure there's alignment and justification and you know, have that as we unroll this budget through September. And I've said it from a staff to a board member, but I just wanted to be on record that that would be my expectation.
Understand, totally. Moving on to programs, workforce stabilization and program adjustments. So we had really had an internal discussion about when would be the time that we would look at these programs and when would there be a need to make some sort of corrections or right sizing or reductions. And a year ago, we thought that that would happen in fiscal '24, and we've kind of changed our mindset on that. We really think we need to give the agencies an opportunity to utilize the workforce stabilization monies that we recently funded, and we need to let the new programs ramp up and have an opportunity to kick in and get it going. So right now, we have not budgeted or forecasted for any reductions or right sizing in '24. However, we do feel like it would probably be necessary in fiscal '25 to address that. So we have a modest reduction amount of $500,000 for fiscal '25. And then we felt like moving into '26, that would probably be really the year that we could determine if the program just wasn't making it, or if there needed to be a change or a move in that direction. Again, these are just estimates that we're trying to determine if we needed to right size, but for the forecast that we're looking, or the budget for fiscal '24, we don't have any right sizing at that time.
I'm comfortable with your thinking on that. My only recommendation would be is really to focus in that in '24, you're really beginning to do that, you're addressing those issues. You're looking at and doing the assessments across the board on all these programs to prepare for. And if there are those in '24 that are showing the signs that need change, let's change those appropriately during that period of time. I just wouldn't want to sit back and wait a little bit too long, and only to find out that we knew the issue all along. So I would, again, my only recommendation on that is you can continue considering what you're doing, but at the same token, ensure that you're really doing a heavy evaluation in '24 of those as those funds are moved out and used.
Karen may be able to fill in a little bit more on this, but I was going to say, with new programs, we really won't be at a point where we can, the word we use, evaluate them, because they will have barely had a full year. On the other hand, I'm guessing, and Karen's had this experience, that there may well be programs that have what I'll call failure to launch. I mean, they don't even get to the point where we've had a full year of operation that we are then looking at evaluating efforts. It's really clear they just didn't get it together to launch it all. And in that sense, what I would commit to you is we're not going to wait around forever to see if they get it together, if they haven't gotten it together within a reasonable period of time. I know, Karen, do you want to add more to that?
Well, and yes, both for workforce stabilization and new programs, we have them submitting quarterly reports to us. So we will be monitoring those, throughout this and during this time. And for the new programs, our teams are meeting, in some cases monthly, with that new program. So I really feel like we have our finger on how that implementation is going, maybe some of the challenges, especially right now. I think staffing is our biggest challenge across the board. And so some of the challenges that are happening with that. But we have them submitting quarterly reports where our teams are reviewing that. We will, be coming at some point to the board to report out on how we're seeing our first wave of workforce stabilization, who was funded last April. So they have now just come up on a year. And then our second group, we just funded, these past few months, as well as the new programs. So we will be collecting that information and reviewing that on a regular basis.
As far as the capital RFA, as you know, at the last board meeting, we did come to the board to approve the release of the capital RFA. And this is just to let you know that we had budgeted $1,750,000 in fiscal '23, as well as $1,750,000 in fiscal '24. The RFA that was just released combined those two for $3.5 million, and that the release went out the day after the board meeting. We will be coming before the board at the May board meeting to do a formal budget amendment to move those funds out of the fund balance reserve for 23 into 24. But if you're looking at this forecast right now, you're seeing the 175 because fiscal 23 is showing the 2227. And so the 2227 is the 175 that we had budgeted, and it's that carryover amount from the 22 awards that we gave that they, because of supply chain demands and so forth, they asked for a permission and we approved that rollover. So there was $477,000 that we approved rolling over. So that's included in that 2227.
So it'll be the 2227, 326 plus the 175.
Actually, minus.
No, minus, so,
For fiscal year 23.
right, we're gonna take out of the 2227, 175, and move it
Move
over.
it over, right.
Right, and that will leave you in 23, the 477.
Okay, that's what I,
What
yeah,
we just released will actually. What we just released will actually hit in 24.
got it.
That's not, all that
Right,
wasn't all that
so,
clear.
yeah, even though we've started the process and we've sent out the award and we are,
So we won't actually be distributing that money,
until 10/1,
10/1,
correct, which is next fiscal year. So we want to make sure we've got the money in the right bucket, and right now we've got a piece of it here and a piece of it next year.
So the applications or the requests for those monies, clearly, those agencies know they have quite
Yes,
some time to wait for that money.
well, the process is clearly defined relative to when the applications come in and when they reviewed and when they're awarded. When they're awarded, they will have the time frame that they have to spend the money. So they'll have between 10/1/24 through,
Right.
I'm sorry,
I'm
10/1/23.
just putting myself on the other side of the table
yeah,
and
24.
understanding that's a
And then,
wait.
we have reached out to the agencies who we did approve the rollover amount from fiscal '22, the 477. And it's my understanding, it looks like all but 100,000 of that will be used by the end of this
By the end of this year.
fiscal year, correct. I think one of the agencies decided they just weren't going to go forward with the request that they had asked for the vehicle. I believe it was a vehicle they were trying to get. But this is just to let you know, in our forecast, that's where we are, and then we'll come to the board to formally move the funds over. That moves us into lapse. And so lapse is always something that we try to monitor the best we can. When we were here before, we were happy that we had come in at the end of the fiscal year '22 at a lapse percentage of 19.12%, which was lower than what it had been in many, many years. However, I mean, we're not jumping for joy because we would love to get us back to about a 10% lapse, which is where we were back in fiscal '18. And when we rose to 13% was our lapse, and then COVID hit, it went to 15, and then at the end of '21, we were at 21%. We didn't take the time to readjust or withhold funds. We attributed a lot of it to COVID. They couldn't staff, they couldn't spend the money on participants. So we were happy to see that when '22 closed out, we were at a 19.12% lapse. At the time we spoke to you in February, we were projecting the year to end out at about 16.8 lapse. Based on our current analysis and look at our programs, that's risen a little bit to about 17.7. So this projection is reflecting for a current year of 17.77. And we've adjusted going forward what we think the lapse would be. So we're utilizing a 15% lapse for next year. And then it would decline to where we would get back to the 10%. Susan, you've got your,
I sure do. I would like to involve Karen Bogus in this conversation. I know it's both fiscal and program, but, you know, projections at this table are one thing, reality is another. And I think even where we are right now for 2023, you know, with Beth's permission, I'm going to Karen to say, you know, what actions are we taking to help agencies not have this happen, given that we're already within May, sight of May, because we need to be doing things different to get a different result. And I think we're improving, but we're not improving to the level that our expectations were. And I also am saying that's a pretty big stretch there. I think 1777, and then, you know. So I know I've had some times with these materials, and I just like to know, what are we doing on a day-to-day basis when we see an agency that's projecting out at your level and your staff's level? You know, what are we doing?
Well, I'll say this, we're continuously monitoring programs and, talking with them about what are their challenges, what areas, and again, I feel like I'm a broken record when I talk about staffing. That is a huge piece and part, and even with the workforce stabilization, and so when we think about the amount of programs that we, over 50 programs that we provided workforce stabilization funds to address some of these issues. And as we're watching that, how that is impacting whether or not they were lapsing already, is that, now they're lapsing more if they can't address the staffing issue. That is the big item. We work with the organizations all the time, ask them for their recruitment and retention plans, talk to them about their challenges, try to address it in different ways. That's on the staffing side. If there are other areas that they are lapsing in, participant expenses, again, having those conversations on a regular basis when we're out there doing observations, when we're meeting with the programs and the providers and all of that. In some cases, we can make movement. In other cases, there remains a challenge. I will say for our out-of-school time programs, that also provides summer programming. That's one of the things we see, that is a longer period of time, longer day, longer hours, where they serve a large amount of children. So hoping to see that improves. We've already heard from, for Summer Bridge, that more participants are registering this year than have previously, so that's good news. So really trying to get back to the numbers served that we were serving prior to COVID.
So then I look to Beth and I say, I know we have policies and procedures that prohibit moving money around easily on a case-by-case basis for an agency. I get it. I was on the other side of this table putting my fists up all the time to say, give us a break here. So is there anything that can happen should you come up with an agency that, yes, there's some lapsed dollars because of staffing issues over here, but they have these needs that would advance another something that suits our strategy, or that suits, that it would be pleasing for us to do that and have some latitude or flexibility. And I know that comes right back to Beth and possibly this board, but again, we're looking at this over the long term and saying something has to be different.
Yeah, we do have a mechanism for budget amendments within an agency's budget, and I can't speak to what sort of prior attitudes were about a budget amendment being a bad thing, and that may well be. I hope, we're not looking at budget amendments being a bad thing. There are times when it looks abusive, but if somebody comes in and says, I'm not able to spend all my participant support dollars, but we're in the marketplace looking for XYZ kind of person, can I put some of the money there, here, and I think I can start hiring some of them. I think there'd be a good discussion, and it really goes between Laura Brock's folks and Karen Boges's folks to say, and obviously Diana with budget, does this make sense? I mean, that's sort of the bottom line is, does this make sense? And if it makes sense, there is that mechanism, and we would do that. You
We,
all can
we
speak.
do often get budget amendments within the agency's budget. We like to limit that to 4 a year, although, you know, we get sometimes more than that for a given agency. But if they could at least look at their, you know, budget to actual variances on a quarterly basis and kind of let us know. It rises to my level if it's something that doesn't seem right or maybe out of the ordinary. But we get budget amendments, for example, rent has gone up, and so the line item for rent, they need more money, and they're going to take it from this line item. And we often approve many of those. To answer your question also about trying to control the lapse percentage being so high, I will say that now that we've kind of right-sized my program finance unit division with the number of staff, they have more time to be able to be proactive when they're looking at the monthly reimbursements and reach out to the agencies to say, hey, you've got a line item budget of $50,000 for this and you've only spent 10. You know, what's going on? To reach out to an agency that says, we haven't gotten your monthly reimbursement for 2 months. What's the deal? So I feel like they have the time now to be a little more proactive to kind of find out what are the reasons behind we're not getting these reimbursement requests. But to specifically to answer your question on the budget amendment, I know it's a lengthy process, and we do approve several of those on a regular basis.
Appreciate, I really do. I really do appreciate the discussion, so maybe in a way today's meeting was good, that we can be a little bit more informal and specific. My recall, and it could be very old information and very old opinions and feelings, but my recall is that budget amendments having to do with lapsed dollars is what was not viewed or not even considered, or it was. And so I'm just curious, has that lightened up just a little?
Well, I think within operations, it has without a doubt. What I would say is, I mean, when I first got here, you know, I had at least one agency say, and they had a very large budget, and said, you know, oh, we know we're going to have this amount of lapse with that many personnel. They were always going to have openings, and we'd like a new fill in the blank, you know, computer system, telephone system, you know, whatever, something that was clearly capital. It was not operating. And I said, I don't think so. That's not what those are for. Now, if we have, particularly if the request provides closer to the volume of service and the number of kids served, I mean, that's where, you know, and or the quality of the service that's provided the kids, those are the kinds of things we're really looking for and we want to see. If it's, now, we also have the other, I'm just waiting for the calls about insurance, about property insurance. I think we can anticipate that that's going to happen. Just depends on when people's re-up time is. But anybody who's gotten, you know, their homeowners' property insurance knows those numbers are going crazy. And it's part of the reason we had a fairly large COLA for non-personnel going into this year for our agencies, because we knew insurance was going to be a fairly big part of their non-personnel budgets. So we were looking at personnel specifically through the eyes of workforce stabilization, but we did not, even though we reduced the personnel COLA because we were already looking at it specifically with workforce stabilization, we kept the non-personnel piece as high because we knew those things were still, inflation was still hitting all of those pieces.
Right, and you bring up a good point, Beth, because I jumped over that item on the memo here. So on the, going back to the program COLAs, we are projecting a 3% COLA on the personnel and related costs, as well as a 7% on the operating. The blended rate between the two comes out to 4.2%, but we felt like we had already given them all this money for workforce stabilization, for salaries, but we knew insurance and utilities and these other expenses were going to increase. So we factored in, we're able to break out the amount of reimbursements that we have between personnel related and operating. And so this particular forecast is using a 3% COLA on the personnel side and a 7% on the operating. I also jumped over future programming. Sorry about that. My eyes are just, getting to the end here. On the future programming, and you had spoke to this already, Ms. Ralston. So last year, our future programming number was like $5 million because we were anticipating getting out all these programs with the strategic plan and the letters of intent. So this year, our budget projections for fiscal '24 has been reduced to $750,000, which your point earlier was having to do with staffing that would align with the future programming. So we have enough on our hands right now with all the new programs that are out there. We've got $4.7 million already in for the 12 strategic aligned programs that we have. And so the 750 is a potpourri of things that we've kind of taken a look at to say that we might want to consider for the next year for future programming. Moving forward, we've identified a couple new QELI sites that we think that we'd be ready to implement or go out and take a look at. And we've factored that in projection outward. But for the next year, the fiscal '24, we can't take on that task right now, or at least, and Beth's got her light on, she might want to speak to that as well.
I was just going to note that, that per this projection, we've got $673,000 in future programming. You want to just point out where that, where that is in the fiscal year '23 line item?
I'll look to
It's-
Diana on that.
I mean, it's up in program continuation, isn't it, once we actually sign contracts?
Yes. Right, the money that's been awarded for the new programs and workforce stabilization is in program continuation, so you see it's increased from 85 million to 97 million in FY '24.
Sure.
Oh, I see it. Program continuation, I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if you look at what that's done from fiscal year '22 to '23 in particular, as well as '23 to '24, once you approve those things, then we put them into program continuation.
I really appreciate that point and shoot direction here. That makes.
And so when you're looking at future programming, it's clearly brand-new programs that we anticipate in that fiscal year, and we're budgeting 750.
So I love and appreciate the consideration for investing in additional QELI sites. Is there money to do that with the 750,000? I mean, I would be very inclined to approve more for
So
QELI sites.
In the fiscal '25 year, we've got $2 million in there
Right, I
just
saw.
for that.
Okay,
So it jumped from 750 to 2.05, and that's the money for the QELIs.
but why the wait from
'Cause
24
we
to?
got,
Why the wait from 24 to 25?
Isn't there one in '24 and one in '25, or is it one in '25, one in '26?
it's,
Yeah, Karen?
1 in 25 and 1 in 26.
So why the wait?
Finding providers and locations, isn't it, Karen?
Yes, that's been one of the challenges, is finding really locations that are able to implement the quality early learning components.
When we looked the last time.
And locations, period.
And locations, period. The last time we did that, the only interested party was our club.
Correct. When we did Lemon,
And we did the Lemon Street, and they've been open, this is their first full year.
yeah, this is they're not even open a year yet.
Not even open a year.
But
So-
quality is meeting your expectations?
Well, they are building towards that because, for example, the same thing with staffing. They're working on hiring all of the staff at that program. So there's certainly, I think that's one of the challenges is with new programs when they're implemented, their launch period, what we found even prior to COVID, but even so now, is that it takes a long time for them to get all the staffing in place to make sure, all of those pieces and parts are happening.
Right, so you're making my point for me, why wait? You're making the point I'm trying to make. So if we're going to implement in 25 and 26, knowing that that launch period is X, I'm asking, could we somehow back it up and see what we can do in 24 to keep the momentum going? And it's sort of a, it's the momentum that drives action. So again, you made the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and I would say locations, again, that's been, finding a building or a facility that is ready to be converted, if need to be, into a child care center with all of the different licensing requirements. So yes.
Understood.
So if we can, if we were to be able to find a provider who could find a location and have all of that in place.
I think I want to be forthcoming and say, at this moment, if we went off with our hair on fire and tried to do it as quickly as we could, I think it would be incredibly difficult to have anything that could open in the fall. In the fall, which would be 24. Otherwise, the soonest anything would open would be fall. It's fall 24, but it's September 24, right before the end of this fiscal year.
Right, especially for any kind of school readiness program.
But we can certainly look at that. I think we've struggled saying, okay, our club or whoever, take on one more when you can't get the last one staffed.
You can see I've been very quiet, listening and understanding. You have to already. You have to be already looking in 24 if it's taking you that long to get them started. So to be able to create and find these places and the right people and the staffing and all those things. So unless you can tell me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that you are, even though they may not start till 25 or so, you're looking right now to try to move them as fast as you can. And if you could open one in 24, you would do it. Am I right or am I wrong?
I think that we would, I hear all that you all are saying today, and I think we need to go.
It may feel like more than two.
But I think that, I think we understand, and so I think we would need to go back and look to see what our plan, how this would fit into the plan. Again, I think it's fiscal year 24 would potentially have to be an RFP or something like that. What would that look like? Or if it was a sole source, what would that look like? And that, yes, it would optimally to open a center in August or September is the most ideal, because that follows the, school kind of,
Sure.
Yeah, the school kind of timeline. So, and that gives time also for parents, to be thinking and being able to make plans in the community and the outreach that's needed.
But just going back to what we're saying, that the locations don't just appear in that time frame. You're searching, you're looking, you're trying to find the right footprint and the right place to be able to do these things, and that takes some time. I think all we're really saying is anywhere we get the opportunity to accelerate it, that'd be great if you can do that. But at the same token, understanding all the issues you need to go through to get prepared for any of those things that could be streamlined or pushed quicker is really, I think, what we're asking for.
I just want to say that we've really heard you, and we'll, and Karen and I in particular will just sort of brainstorm on what would that look like and what are all the pieces. Would it take a procurement, all of those things that can take longer, but what can we do to get the timeline going faster?
And if I can,
that's what we've heard from you.
If I can go back to maybe beating a dead horse a little bit, go back to the lapsed question, and I was listening to what can we do and where can we go, and can we use these funds, or whatever. What makes up that 17% lapse? I mean, how many organizations? Is it one? Is it all of them? Is it, at what level, how much of it? Is there one, are there a couple of big tranches that in certain areas, or are they spread across it all? I mean, I would, as a board member, I would want to understand, as we're trying to help create and make the decisions on whether to make adjustments, I really need to understand what's creating that 17.7.
And it's across the board. So back before COVID, the way we calculated the COLAs was based on your lapse percentage. And we used to go back through all the agencies and we'd put them in different buckets. So if your lapse was less than 5%, you got this amount. If your lapse was between 5 and 10, you got this, and if it was 10 and over. So we had that information, and then what we found when COVID hit, there was like way, the percentage that was over the 10 was huge. So we've kind of moved away from that calculation, but we have the information to be able to go back and look to see, what percentage of the programs or what types of programs are we seeing that the lapse percentage is just way high.
And if there's consistency with same programs creeping up, and
Right.
not improving over time.
Right, but I would have to say it's probably 80% lapse, 85% of the programs lapse, something.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
I'm gonna
Are
go-
they lapsing, is 85% of them all lapsing, but there are only 20% of those that are sucking
Right.
it all up.
And
That's what I do.
And I know one of the things I did when we went through these lapse calculation is you can pull your spreadsheet up and do the what if, what's over a certain dollar amount and what's over a certain percentage, and then you can kind of isolate it. And we've gone through that together as a group to kind of figure out what's going on, but we can certainly go back and look at that again.
And again, I think an informal discussion today with just two of us that have been around for a while and know what all of this means. I want to go back to future programming for one last comment, particularly about Quelly. I hear Karen Bogus and Beth Houghton would need to get together and kind of see what that looks like. But could you tell me how Barbara is more the evaluation assessment of the delivery of those services, so she wouldn't be involved with the upfront.
Correct.
Is that my assumption is correct then?
Correct.
All right, and then the last item to discuss is the intentional spend down of the fund balance amount. So we are working very diligently at spending that down. If you look at the spreadsheet, there's a line that's about 3/4 the way down. This is revenues minus expenditures. And so if you look at fiscal '24, that's a negative number of 22.8. So just based on our revenue and expenditures, we're budgeting that we're going to, if we spent every dollar and had zero lapse, we would have dipped into fund balance by $22 million. We add back to that the projected lapse. So when you add back the projected lapse of 18 million, our net spend down is 4.6 million. So the lapse plays a big part on our unrestricted fund balance amounts. And even using the lapse percentages on a declining basis, you're spending down 4 million to 4 million. When you get up into the last year on the projection here of fiscal '28, based on the numbers that we have today that are in here, your unassigned fund balance would be at 9.34%. Our target is 8.33. And so we're making progress to get there. If we spend down more, meaning the lapse is smaller, then we're going to be reducing that unassigned balance sooner, if you would, which is fine. But we have all intentions to spend it, and then we throw it back in because we have so much lapse. But the goal is to spend it down, and I think we've worked very hard to do that. Any questions on the spend down or anything else that I may have jumped over? Not intentionally by any means. So we wanted to come before the Finance Committee, like we did in February, to kind of go through all of these items. And we had, when we went through our calendar, you kind of knew how our calendar worked, coming to you. And then going back before and I have to look at Diana, going back before the board in June. And then we come back to finance once again in August with any changes that we may have. We bring it back to finance one more time before we go to the board for final in September.
So before we go to the Chief Executive Officer's report, I want to make sure that you all know the level of respect from the board to the staff here and the quality of the work. And so I know these questions and pushing and prodding come a little bit more intense because this is the first view of the future. And so I don't want to misinterpret, except that I was teasing Beth Houghton right before the meeting started, that somebody has to be Bob Dillinger and Bernie McCabe. And so I take that baton. Literally, at one point, Bernie had given me his remote at some strategic meeting, and he said, "You may vote for me." So I just want to not misinterpret here that there's anything but a healthy outside person's assessment and questioning. And so it was nice that it could happen here today in a more informal basis. But I think what you're hearing are particular topics, and I'm looking particularly, we're looking at particular, for me, I can only speak for me, we're looking at particular topics and issues that will need further clarification, justification, and support. But I don't, and I look at staff and say, please do not misinterpret little edge here for anything more than that's our job. That is the job of a board member, to make sure that that healthy debate, discussion, expectation is met. So Beth, Executive Director's report.
I just have a few things. Interestingly, I wrote down as the first point I was going to make that we are beginning to fill our empty positions, but that workforce is still really a challenge. So I thought, well, I could not say that, but what I was going to walk in here and tell you is, as important as anything, that internally at JWB, we're beginning to just sort of catch up. And Laura mentioned, referenced it. But I will say, because of that, a lot of our employees are newer. And, they're a phenomenal group of folks. But they're still on a learning curve to some degree, some more than others. So we're thrilled with our new employees. I think we do have to recognize it is just a different time in the workforce than we've ever experienced before. And I say that for inside in JWB, and we're seeing this outside, that people don't stay places, decades. They stay a couple years and jump for a job that they think they may make more money at. So now, that's the reality, so we've got to figure it out. We can't just wring our hands and say, oh, well. The only other thing is I look forward to seeing everyone here at tomorrow's Kids First Luncheon. It portends to be a really wonderful event. And I think it'll be exciting. We get to give a variety of kinds of folks awards and scholarships tomorrow, and should be great. So I will see you then.
Colleen? So anything for the common good? Mr. McCurrick?
I think think you've said it all. And then Beth almost started us all over again. But I think that, you know, it goes without saying, what Susan, you know, absolutely said correctly is that I've been speaking on behalf of all the board members, everyone has the highest respect for the staff here. And the fact that we can have these kind of conversations without causing any major feathers ruffling or those things. But we're really looking at it. I mean, Laura and you and I had, in our last conversation on the phone, was kind of in that same boat. So I think it's really great that we can do that and that we're all focused on the right things. And last but not least, I really am looking forward to tomorrow because I am getting very tired of people asking me who won, and was it my person, and you know, and all that. And we're on vacation. Thank God I was on vacation for a little bit. Then I came back and hit 3 fundraisers in a row, and I was addressed at every one of those. I almost want to say accosted, but I was addressed at every one of those with somebody who was either the person themselves or who happened to be one of the people who wrote in for the candidate, who were just trying to get that answer as to whether their candidate or what that person had won or not. And the only thing I could really say to him was, you know, it was a really tough decision.
Really tough decision. So nothing else for the common good? Well, we certainly fill that hour, and meeting adjourned.